Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says 3 key areas were discussed during a visit to the White House last week. The president was accompanied by a number of cabinet ministers and figures from Labour and business. He says he is confident the goal of opening engagement in order to reset relations was indeed achieved. Now, Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen was also part of the president's delegation, and he is this afternoon live with Newzroom Afrika's Vaylen Kirtley. Vaylen, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Yes, it was a meeting that made global headlines and certainly incredibly dramatic. To get a sense of what happened during that meeting in Washington, John Steenhuisen joins us now. A very good afternoon. Thanks so much for chatting to Newzroom Afrika. After a little bit of reflection, do you feel that you could have handled things a little bit differently, or you still feel that the comments that were made, certainly the ones that we saw, were a good reflection of your stance?
Yeah, certainly. And I think that as we always knew the meeting at the White House was going to be a tough meeting. Nobody expected it to be a cakewalk. And certainly it didn't disappoint. But I certainly think that Team South Africa and South Africa left Washington in a lot better position than we were going into Washington. And I think that's the main thing. I think President Ramaphosa led a delegation in there that was able to engage with our US counterparts, to deal with some of the misperceptions that they may have had about South Africa, to have a frank discussion about the challenges facing us, and then also to get down to the nuts and bolts about why it is important that the two countries strategically are able to trade and have a partnership.
Do you feel there was a missed opportunity to try and explain land expropriation and where the country stands on that a little bit better in the White House?
Well, I think that was a topic that was discussed a bit more in depth over the lunch. Obviously, very difficult in a press conference environment to be able to get into details. And literally, you literally have a few minutes to respond to what's being thrown at you. But I certainly think we had a discussion there with the counterparts. The expropriation act is before the courts. The courts are going to make a determination of it. And that's how democracies work. When laws are passed, people are unhappy about them, they can take them to court. And we are certainly waiting for the outcome of that court case, which will direct us either way. And the point that we did make, however, is that Section 25 of the Constitution remains intact. And no regulation or law can be passed that is contradicting or contrary to Section 25, which protects property rights in South Africa.
What other discussions were had during that meeting, and specifically in the meeting that you had with certain trade officials on the Monday and potential deals? Is AGOA safe?
Well, I think that AGOA was one of the matters that came up. Minister Tau and I attended a meeting with the US Trade Representative, Ambassador Greer, and we had a very good, frank, open exchange. Minister Tau had already put on the table what I think is a very serious trade deal, and I think it showed that South Africa is a serious country with a serious offer. I think when we broached the subject of AGOA, it was made very clear that that is a creature of Congress and that we'd have to obviously engage with Congress. My personal view is I think that AGOA may well still be on the boil, but it is certainly going to be different to the AGOA that we know from the past. And I think that is very, very clear from some of the tariff negotiations that are taking place between the two countries. It's very clear that the sort of blanket tariff-free access will probably be a feature of the past. But we remain to see what happens with Congress, and we were told to engage with Congress on AGOA. But as I say, my personal view is that it will be different. And I've adopted the view, certainly from the Agriculture Department, that we will hope for the best, but we'll prepare for the worst. And that's why we're busy looking at other markets. We're reorienting, trying to deepen and widen products and variety on existing agreements, and look for new countries for South African agricultural goods at the same time.
Speaking about agriculture, how safe is our citrus industry at the moment? We know that the tariffs will hit them hardest.
Yes. Well, I think that what we've done as South Africa is enough to avoid that 30% punitive tariff. I think that the offer that we've put on the table, you must remember, we also have a lot to offer the United States of America. Our rare earth minerals, our platinum group metals are all absolutely in demand in America. And so it's in their interest to have it. We also happen to have well-priced, excellent quality agricultural goods, which their American supermarkets need. Remember as well that South Africa and the US are counter-seasonal on things like citrus. So we need to fill an important gap in their market. And I think that we've done enough, I believe, to make the case on why we should be ensuring that the citrus trade carries on, and that while we can fill the gap, particularly given America's own constraints on citrus. They've had an outbreak of citrus greening in Florida, which was one of their biggest citrus producing areas. And with South Africa's rand-dollar exchange, with the excellent quality of the product that comes out of South Africa, I think it's a no-brainer that our goods need to remain on American shelves, and it's good for the US market and good for the US consumer as well.
I want to go back to that meeting in the White House. It was dramatic, it was theatrical. Can you tell us what the energy was like in the room and how you personally felt and your thoughts on President Trump as a person?
Well, you're sitting in the most powerful office in the world in front of the most powerful politician in the world. It's very daunting. It's big match temperament stuff. And I remember saying to Ernie Els on the bus on the way to the White House as we were screaming down the streets of Washington, saying that I now know what the Springboks must feel like on the team bus on the way to a big World Cup final match, because this is the big league. Oval Office is a lot smaller than it looks on TV, and you're a lot closer quarters than it looks like. And certainly very warm, engaging start, very dramatic turn of events when the video footage of Mr. Malem and Mr. Zuma was played. And then obviously you've got to play out your socks to try and explain what's happened. I hope that Team South Africa was able to get our message across. I think we did. And certainly the very warm and engaging lunch that we had afterwards, I think was very, very constructive. And President Ramaphosa obviously led the conversation there. President Trump, very interesting guy. It was a wonderful opportunity to meet him. I think that people underestimate him at their peril. I think he's a lot smarter than some people think he is, and also very determined about what he wants to achieve for America and for his administration, and very firm about that. I've also found him rather humorous. Behind closed doors, he's an excellent raconteur, and certainly the stories that he was able to tell and of his experiences, very entertaining. I certainly really enjoyed the time I got to spend at close quarters with him. You obviously see somebody on TV and you gather a perspective about them. When you actually meet that person in real life, it obviously puts a different perspective on it. And I certainly enjoyed the time that we got to interact with him.
What do you make of Johan Rupert's criticism to the DA-led Western Cape and the level of crime?
I think that Johan, and he did send me a message afterwards, very generously, to say, look, he's hell of a sorry. It's not what he was trying to say. The point he was trying to make is that it's not only white people that are killed in South Africa, that it is coloured people in the Western Cape, on the Cape Flats. I don't think he was necessarily attacking the DA. It would be foolhardy to do so, because there is no policing powers that the DA has in the Western Cape. The policing powers reside at national police level. And that's also why we're fighting so hard to have policing devolved to provincial and local government, because we do believe that the international best practice shows that when you devolve policing to a local level, it's far more effective and efficient. But I certainly think that the point he was trying to make is that this notion that it's only white people being murdered in South Africa is simply not borne out by the statistics and the facts.
What do you make of those people that are riding on the ticket that South Africa has got a white genocide that is currently underway?
Well, I think it's irresponsible, and I think it also is an insult to real genocides taking place around the world. There's a very specific definition for genocide, and let's just not beat around the bush. We have a massive problem in South Africa. 62 people murdered every single day. One murder is too many, but 62 in a country that's not at war is excessive. And we've got to do something about it. And I think that that is now the wake-up call. But I don't think it helps us to deal with the problem if people are going around misdiagnosing the problem. If you look at the crime statistics, it's very clear who bears the burden of murder in South Africa. It's not targeted at a specific minority race group. The problem is that we have is with farm murders, they are particularly brutal and vicious. And we need to understand the psychology about why that is the case. And I think we now have a golden opportunity as South Africa in our G20 year to be able to demonstrate to the world what we're doing about dealing with crime. It's clearly now in the spotlight. We can't wish the problem away. But I think what we can do is, as Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. I think we can use this crisis now, the world spotlight, to actually get on top of crime and demonstrate to the full glare of the world what we're actually doing to beat crime and murder in South Africa.
It was a message that was sent by the entire Team South Africa at the White House, and that was calling for investment, calling for partnership, calling for the technology that America has, the money that America has, their know-how. But what kind of message and confidence are we instilling in investors, potential investors, when all they are looking at in South Africa is crime?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, crime is a huge push factor about why you are not able to attract investment. I mean, you can talk about red tape and the other. If people don't feel safe when they are investing in your country, it's a big deterrent. So we have to deal with that. But I think that, as I've said, I think we've got an opportunity now, given the fact that this issue is now front of mind for many in the world, to demonstrate what we're doing about it. And I think that in doing so, we can show again the South African exceptionalism, that we have problems. We've had bigger problems in the past. We've been able to deal with those. I'm convinced that with the right synergy between technology and advancement in policing methodology, re-equipping the South African police service, working together with private security, farm watchers, rural safety initiatives, and far more intelligence-led operations, that we can get on top of rural security problems that we're facing in the country, and we can start to deal with the scourge of farm murders.
During that moment, which even the President joked about a little bit earlier on at the SIDSA symposium, when the lights went down, akin to what happened during the White House, the one thing that came out of those visuals, you've mentioned it, seeing the visuals of Mr. Malema and Mr. Zuma singing Kill the Boer. What is your stance on that song?
Well, I think it's an abhorrent song. I don't think it's got a place in South Africa. And I think it is anachronistic to the modern South Africa where we're at. It was used at a time when South Africa was a very different place. Right now, we need our farmers. We need our farmers 3 times every day when we put food on the table for ourselves and for our families. They are important members of society, and we should not be calling for the killing of farmers. In fact, we should not be calling for the killing of anybody in South Africa. It doesn't have a place in a constitutional democracy. We resolve issues through dialogue and talking things through, not by killing or not by the barrel of the machine gun. And I think that the important point I was able to make in America is that this is just a 9% party. They are a fringe. The majority of South Africans, black and white, believe in working together. They don't believe in killing people to get what you want. They believe in working together. And what you had in the White House sitting there were the builders, President Ramaphosa and Team South Africa, and what you had on the TV screen were the breakers, the people determined to divide us and to destroy the country. And I think that the builders are the ones that now have the parliamentary majority. They're in government, and it's now up to us to make sure that we demonstrate to the rest of South Africa why it is important to continue to back the builders by creating economic growth, by growing job opportunities for more South Africans, and showing South Africans that this government does have the will to keep them safe, whether they live in a township, whether they live on the Cape Flats, or whether they're living on a remote rural farm.
John, it is fair to say, though, you have sung that song at rallies before, though.
I've never sung that song in my life before, and I never will. And anybody who says I've sung that song is fundamentally dishonest, and I challenge them to provide any footage whatsoever of me ever singing that song. I've noticed that the fake media have been using AI to try and create that impression. I'm a liberal Democrat. I believe in parliamentary democracy. I believe in talking issues through and finding a common way through. That's why we joined the GNU. That's how the GNU came to be born. Killing people does not achieve anything. We resolve things with words, not at the barrel of the gun.